Welcome back. We want to wrap up our news review this morning on Power Breakfast with my panelists Sandro Chola, Nerima Wako, Kai Kissinger and Dennis Thumbi. We've been looking at the biggest story just before the break, and that has to do with the technicalities that are already bedeviling the NASA presidential petition before the Supreme Court. Of course, this will continue to be the biggest talking point this week as the process continues to take shape. It's only 11 days to go before the 14-day deadline ends, and of course very many deadlines. Initially we thought by now we would be seeing court processes and the Supreme Court judges, because some of us are interested to see just how they will be dressed. Probably that's the one thing that will be very different this time around. The Supreme Court of Justice Mutunga was very different. He did away with those wigs, and even the gown was green in color. CJ Maraga comes and very quickly went back to the red gab and that wig. Is that what we expect?
You see, the practice of law and judges and outfit has been is colonial, and it's inherited from the British masters. And wearing the wig is one of the things. And the reason behind this is that the British thought that you have to stand out, and you have to be seen that you are different from the rest, and that wig is basically to make you feel protected and have power and that kind of a thing.
So we do expect the entire bench this time around to have the wig.
So it was inherited by the British. Now in Kenya, we had this wig for many years, and judges were, it's called robbing. You have to rob yourself, and lawyers are also expect to rob. And it happened through all the chief justices that have been in power. But when Mutunga came in, Justice Mutunga came in, he felt that he needs to change, and therefore that judges ought not to wear the wigs, and the advocates don't need to rob when they're going to appear before them. But I think that changed because he was coming in as an outsider, and he thought that that's a fresh idea to put. And some lawyers argued and said it's a good thing, others said it's not a good thing, you need to stand out and all that. So, but right now, if you saw what's happening in terms of swearing in yesterday, you see the High Court judges are wearing the red gowns.
And those who had access to the wigs, they had them.
Those who had access to the wigs, they had them on. So it means that there's a way, the liberal thinking of doing things and the traditional way of doing things. So the current CJ is of the traditional way of doing things, in the sense that this has been the practice and the norm of how courts operate, and I'm going back there. So legally, I'm expecting therefore that, and there was even a circular, by the way, issued, that if you are an advocate, you should rob when you're appearing before High Court, and the judges must also rob. So it has gone back to where we used to be. I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but that's been the culture of the institution for years. So what am I expecting? I'm expecting then that in the Supreme Court, if the least they might not do is to wear the wigs, but they will be robbed.
We always see CJ Maraga in that ceremonial gown plus the wig. And if at all Maraga does it, if the CJ does it, it means the entire bench has to have it.
They might do it. So it's something that they will agree and negotiate, because sometimes others feel wearing the wig is very uncomfortable. You are sweating, you know, but then others say it's the center of power, the legal power is in there. So I expect either they will negotiate and wear it, or if the least they can do is not to wear the wigs, but then they will rob officially.
But the color of the robe has changed officially from the green back to the red?
No, the red was initially for the reds were for the High Court and Court of Appeal. In the Mutunga regime, they decided to have green color in terms of the Supreme Court. Now, I'm not so sure right now whether they are going to go to the green or they will use the red. I'm not so sure, but we wait.
It is one of those interesting things that we wait to see, because the face of the Supreme Court, when you remember the 2013 presidential election petition, you remember the green bench. It will be interesting to see if at all it will be white-haired a bench. But as an officer of the court, what is your take on this change in, because you're still a young lawyer, you were there during CJ Mutunga's term, and now you're seeing this difference. What do you feel about it?
Well, it is a distinguished profession, and with its own rules and practices. And I think one thing we are seeing, which is a characteristic of even the other institutions, is that the leadership determines a lot in terms of what happens within the other sectors of that institution. So that if you have a radical judge, then you're going to have certain changes taking place, like not that he was radical, but he had a different kind of thinking. If you have a conservative judge, like what Kissinger has mentioned, you're going to see a return to what we had. But then for me, beyond the dressing, beyond the decorum, beyond the rules of procedure, one thing that I'm seeing within the Supreme Court now, and comparing it to 2013, is the presence of many more female advocates taking on cases as such as this. And I remember when you had the same discussion earlier, you said that they were only preempting that the names that were being advertised as individuals who will be taking up the cases, it was just preemptive. But the more we talk about it, the more it becomes very cemented on people's faces that
it's like the Daily is just appointed.
Yes, the Daily has appointed them, and there's very little representation of women at that level. And so I had this discussion on social media yesterday, where some of the things I was questioning was, in that list there are very few women, and so the presumption will be that it's either the legal profession doesn't have women who can handle such high-level cases, or it's the system still that does not trust women with this kind of cases. And so another presumption that I had is that in the background you're going to have so many women who are going to be the pushing papers,
but not
visible. They are going to do the drafting, they're going to do the filing, they're going to do the printing and arranging meetings, and yet they're equally smart women who are able to do this. So for me, moving forward, perhaps Nerima, sorry, 2022, then we might have
it will be there in 2022.
She might write.
Maybe one petition.
Yes. But then for me moving forward, I think this is a discussion.
We need to see more women.
Yes, we need to see more women, because there are. Because
in
there
2013, that's where we got to Sokefi Kilonzo.
Yes.
Despite all the senior council, and I do understand the senior council sit very close, and even Kefi Kilonzo could not get a seat at the front. She had to sit at the back. But that's where we saw Kefi Kilonzo. Is that the kind of scenario you're looking at, hoping for? And there are differences this time around. Not so many people have been enjoined in this petition. Probably that's why we will get to see fewer lawyers. Yes?
I believe so. I think what is interesting when we're watching such cases, for me, I have to talk about the wig in general. Here we are talking about, we changed our constitution, we're so proud of it, but we're still following colonial rules. That white hair is because they were white people, and I'm assuming the white is for wisdom. I'm not sure. And so why are we still following
We should have our
rules?
own wigs.
Yeah, we have our own. Or even black ones. We have black wigs. Like Maina Kageni. Anyway, so back to the point. What I'm saying is, it would be inspiring to see a lot more women. It would be. Because it's difficult to be able to even watch politics and not see as many women even represented. And for a lot of young women who have an interest in that, but not that, there are women who do amazing work. But if we even look at the case of, not even only in Kenya, let's look at Hillary Clinton. She was over and beyond qualified compared to Trump. And yet, she still struggled to even get votes in her save. And it's not because she is a woman, it was what she was capable of doing. Being able to be, head of state with security and foreign affairs, and even being a senator in the 90s, and even being a first lady under Bill Clinton. Those are things that are experience, and experience galore. Even we can talk about Masakarua. So a lot of times when we talk about even women in law or women in governance, they tend to outperform and do much better to be able to sit on the same bench as a man who might not have the same qualifications.
Dennis, in terms of optics, what are you looking forward to seeing this time around? Some of us just want to see what color of gown they will wear, and the wigs or not.
Certainly, I think from the women folk, Chiloba will be replaced by another handsome-looking judge. Perhaps we'll have Marangai or something. But for me, the key thing I'm looking for, and I'm excited that we have a new legal framework, certainly, that is guiding our electoral space. That for me is something that's getting me excited. In fact, I'm praying that I'd want to see this as a prudent case study across the world being used as an election petition that was absolutely, based on the legal framework. We need to test our constitution, and we need to test our IBC, because let me tell you what, if there's an area that the taxpayer has invested in, is in our electoral process. We have one of the most expensive elections in the world because of certain issues that we wanted to medicate, thereabout. So I'm excited to see that space. I'm also excited to see the judiciary redeem itself and win public confidence. Suddenly, because we have
we have a certain trajectory that the courts have been disqualified, you know, for embracing corruption and many other things. I am actually waiting to see the redemption of the bench, and for me it's an amazing thing, because it's an amazing profession, you know.
Yes.
It's where, you know, it espouses a lot of intellectualism. It's the bedrock of this nation, you know. So that for me is something that I'll be keenly standing, because it also would show us the trajectory that this nation is going to. Because one of the things, we have been preaching peace a lot. And this is where we get to see justice. But also I need to say that as a security expert, there cannot be a framework of justice in the absence of peace. So it's very important now for us to see justice getting dispensed, so that then we can restore public confidence in democracy, you know, and so it's the judiciary that is going to redeem that space. And because also, if you look at the voter apathy, this election, I think it was 76% in terms of turnout. If this process fails or flops, or it's questioned thoroughly,
it will affect future.
It will affect the future and the democratic space of the
Now, I do understand our time is up, but if my director could give me like 3 minutes, because I need us to look at this one more headline, and it has to do, now that we're talking about women, it has to do with the gender parity principle. And there's already a process before the courts, and it's been captured in the page 5 of the Standard. The Attorney General has opposed an activist's bid to stop opening of Parliament. Civil society groups want to block the reopening of the National Assembly and Senate over the 2/3 gender rule. Of course, Parliament, the National Assembly and the Senate are set to be to begin their sessions within the next 1-2 weeks or so. But if this bid goes through, that will not happen simply because the 11th Parliament failed to pass that through. As it is currently, even the National Assembly has not met that gender principle. There's still only 70 members as it is. We need about 47 more.
47, yeah.
Still, we do not know how to go about it, but a quick discussion on that, even as we wrap up this. Kissinger, do you think this one can go through?
I think it's a good thing, and that's the beauty of our constitution, and that's the beauty of our laws, in the sense that we agreed as Kenya, this is what we want to do. Now, the most interesting thing is that civil society, I expected this to happen, and civil society have gone to court. I do recall that I was in the past mostly in civil society, and it's a proactive approach of doing things. Now it's seized by the courts. I'm hoping and praying that it goes through, because if it goes through, it will be a very good thing, because it's a failure of the former Parliament.
But don't you think that that will present a problem? Because the argument is that if you stop Parliament from being sworn in, then who can enact this law?
It's unlikely that they will stop Parliament being sworn in. Very, very unlikely, because these are functions of, and it's very difficult for the judiciary to inject a Parliament, because the arms of government are completely independent, but at the same time the three arms of government must synergize and work coherently together. So it's very unlikely the injunction might take place. But it just talks to reforms that are yet to go through.
Yes.
And one of the things could be setting a standard that the next Parliament must reform this thing, because the previous 11th Parliament failed to do so.
And it will be interesting to see how this discussion will continue, because if at all it goes either way, Parliament still has to meet this gender principle. It has to comply with it, even as it is right now. Otherwise, we will see endless court petitions just challenging the constitutionality of the National Assembly and the Senate. That means the National Assembly has to get 47 more women. From where?
Well, as Trump will say, they are made up of fine people, and so I'm sure these are issues that they should either be able to address them through negotiations, through party lists, like we've mentioned, or through even the court processes. And I agree with Kissinger that this is the beauty of the Constitution, so that we are living the spirit and letter of the Constitution, and going to court is one of the ways in which we can actualize its provisions. So the kind of contestation by the civil society is welcome, but then this should also be buttressed upon clear understanding of what exactly we want from these 2/3, what are the kind of leadership or the kind of women that we want in Parliament moving forward, so that we are not only legislating and adjudicating over issues, we have a broader agenda as far as gender representation in Parliament is concerned.
Yes, and it must be exciting, because as you said, there are very many qualified women. Getting 47 more women will not be a problem.
No, it's not a problem. The two of them are here.
And someone has just endorsed you for that position, even before.
Yes, absolutely. It's not going to be a problem. There are several women out there who would be able to fit. But the main narrative that I hear a lot of people saying is, now if constituencies or people didn't vote these women, where are we forcing issues?
But even the question comes, how many women presented themselves
exactly
for such positions?
That's a discussion for another day, because there are a lot of difficulties and technicalities to put women in elective positions. But I do want to talk about affirmative action and why it's so important. Let's try and think about perhaps the civil rights movement of Martin Luther King in the 60s. He forced for black people to be able to have access to education, and for the first time we had black students in completely white dominant universities, and a lot of white people of course were upset with it. Why would you have a black person here? So it's thinking about that. Today black Americans wouldn't be able to attend university if it weren't for him and the civil rights movement. It's the same thing that we're talking about today. If there are women who we don't have affirmative action seats, it would be very difficult for women to enter those positions.
So it's okay to just go ahead and nominate 47 more women?
It's okay, but I'm talking about the gender role. It's not just about women, it's about women today. But in the future, what if men are less than represented?
It is a scary thought.
But that's what women are going through today. So it's for men to be able to have that law.
Your quick comments on this one as we wrap up?
Yeah, I think, you know, I'd be very happy if, you know, Parliament is dissolved, is dissolution completely, because we have to deal once and for all with systemic discrimination of the woman in the political space. And by the way, there's been a lot of you know, enlightenment politically of the woman. From the vote process, they are funded, all that. But in terms of laws, Parliament has refused to enact laws that certainly get us to achieve this. And I don't think there's an easy way towards that process. I think the court, because this Parliament would actually, there hasn't been a word 60 days after the court ruled that Parliament should basically enact these laws. There has been complete silence. So then moving on would mean that's okay, and that is endorsing patriarchy, you know, male dominance in the political process that we've been trying to deal with for a long time. So if the courts rule towards the favor of the House, certainly then these sexist tactics in the political process will grow bigger. And we need to ask ourselves, why are there less women now as elected members as opposed to before, when there's a lot of funding and a lot of you know, sort of positive vibes towards the political woman? What is the issue? What exactly is the issue that we need to deal with? And sometimes you have to stop and check. Sometimes continuing just endorses that it's okay, you know, let's just move on and do that. And I'm telling you, if the House continues on that premise alone, then it's going to be a pity for the woman politician. So I think it's okay for the court to say, dissolve. Let's just stop, first of all, until we deal with this thing that you've been avoiding to deal with. You know, let us first of all deal with this critical issue so that we can
this will definitely make for one of those biggest talking points going forward. Of course, besides the NASA presidential petition, which in the next 14 days will be done, but this one about the gender principle, gender parity principle, will be one of those biggest discussions, because it will definitely affect the Constitution or the existence of the National Assembly and the Senate. Thank you so much, Dennis Ntumbi, a security expert, a former candidate. No, sorry, I keep saying former. A candidate.
Let them dissolve the Parliament so we can meet this.
Still remain a candidate for Senate Nairobi going forward. Next to Dennis, you have Nerima Wako, Executive Director of Siasa Place, Sandra Ochola, an advocate of the High Court of Kenya, and Kai Kissinger, human rights activist and attorney, also a former acting chief registrar of the judiciary. That has been my panel this morning. Thank you so much for your considered opinions on the headlines. Remember, Power Breakfast still continues. Man Cave is coming up. We're talking about the powerful woman. Just moving this discussion from here to that one. Willis Raburu will be conducting that. My name is Freddie Nimuli. From me, it's good morning.